I've been a police officer in Millbrook for almost 20 years, and I've seen my share of strange things. Drunken brawls outside the Red Oak Tavern, late-night prowlers thinking they're slick, even a guy who swore his cat was possessed and tried to have me perform an exorcism. But nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to what happened on that October night out on Sycamore Lane. It was just past midnight, the kind of night where the air feels too still, like the world is holding its breath. My patrol route took me down the outskirts of town, past old farmland and the skeletal remains of houses that time forgot. Most folks in Millbrook didn't venture out here after dark. There wasn't much reason to, unless you had a death wish or a bad case of nostalgia. That's when I saw it, the old Grant house. I damn near drove past it without a second glance the way I always did. But something caught my eye. The back door was wide open. Now, understand this. That house had been empty for years. Ever since Miss Lillian Grant passed away in her sleep, no one had set foot in there. No family left to claim it. No buyers willing to take it, and certainly no squatters, because even the most desperate drifter wouldn't spend the night in that place. Not after what people said about it. I pulled over, headlights cutting through the overgrown yard. The wind had picked up, rattling the brittle branches of the dead oak tree beside the house. The place had always been an eyesore, peeling paint, sagging porch, windows like blackened eye sockets staring out at nothing. But now, with that gaping door, it felt wrong. I radioed in, letting dispatch know I was checking out a possible break-in. No one answered. A dead channel. That was the first sign I should have turned around. But I'm not the kind of guy who backs down from a bad feeling. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped out of the cruiser, and made my way toward the house. The silence was oppressive, the kind that makes your ears ring. My boots crunched against the gravel, and as I stepped onto the porch, the wood groaned under my weight like a wounded animal. I paused at the threshold. The darkness inside was thick, swallowing my flashlight beam whole. "Millbrook PD?" I called out, my voice too loud in the emptiness. "Anyone in here?" No answer. Then, a giggle, faint, somewhere deep inside the house. A child's giggle. I froze. Every hair on my arms stood on end. There shouldn't have been anyone in there, least of all a kid. I swallowed hard and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Damp wood, mildew, dust so thick I could taste it. I swept my flashlight across the foyer. Miss Grant's old furniture was still there, covered in sheets. The chandelier above was thick with cobwebs, the floor coated in years of grime. The sound of a ball bouncing echoed from the hallway. Thump, thump, thump. My grip tightened around my flashlight as I followed the noise, stepping past the old kitchen where dishes still sat untouched in the sink, fossilized in grease and time. I turned the corner, and the ball rolled out of the darkness, stopping inches from my boot. My breath hitched. I shined my flashlight down the hall. The beam flickered, just for a second, and in that brief moment, I saw them. 3 children, standing at the top of the staircase, watching me. My stomach dropped. I lifted my light. They were gone. The air turned ice cold. My breath fogged in front of me. I didn't want to go upstairs. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to turn around and leave. But I didn't, because I had to know. I took the first step, the second, the third. Each one creaked under my weight, the house breathing around me. Halfway up, the laughter started again, this time right behind me. I spun around, flashlight shaking. Nothing. But I felt them. I could feel small, invisible hands brushing against my arms, my back, tugging at the hem of my uniform. I swallowed a scream and pushed forward. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched into darkness. The laughter had stopped, but my heart thundered so hard in my chest I swore it would shake the walls. Then I saw it, a single piece of paper, torn and yellowed with age, lying in the center of the hall. I bent down, picked it up, and flipped it over. It was a page from a children's book, and on it, a drawing of a police officer, the uniform, the gun holster, the badge number, my badge number. The paper trembled in my hands. I felt something breathe against the back of my neck. I turned, flashlight darting across the hallway. Nothing but dust and shadows. I didn't hesitate. I bolted down the stairs, the floorboards shaking beneath me. The laughter started again, shrill, echoing from the walls, the ceiling, the very air itself. I hit the front door at full speed, bursting into the night. The second I stepped off the porch, the sound stopped. The house loomed behind me, dark and silent once more. I didn't stop running until I was back in my cruiser, doors locked, hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. I floored it back to the station. When I told my partner, Officer Mitchell, what happened, he laughed, said it was probably just the wind, or raccoons, or maybe some kids messing with me. I didn't argue, but I knew what I heard, what I saw, what I felt. I never went back to that house. Not for a break-in, not for a prank, not for anything. And if you ever find yourself in Millbrook, do yourself a favor, stay away from the Grant house. Some doors, once opened, should never be revisited. I never told anyone what happened at the Grant house, not really. People talk, and in a small town like Millbrook, you don't want to be the guy with the ghost stories. But that night never left me. Every time I drove past Sycamore Lane, I felt that same heaviness in my chest, that lingering presence in the air. Some nights I swore I could still hear the laughter, just on the edge of my hearing, just faint enough to make me question my sanity. I tried to forget, to move on, to chalk it up to exhaustion. But then I heard about Lucas Graham, and suddenly, I wasn't so sure I was the only one haunted by the past. Lucas was a quiet guy, always had been. He kept to himself, a retired carpenter who'd lived in Millbrook longer than most. He wasn't the type to chase attention, which is why people actually listened when he started telling folks about the woman. It started simple enough. He was repainting his old '68 Ford truck in his driveway, a warm afternoon in late October, nothing out of the ordinary. But then he saw her, a woman standing just at the edge of the sidewalk, watching him. She was tall, dressed in a long blue dress that looked like something out of the 1940. Her dark hair pinned back neatly. Her expression was sad, distant, like she was staring through him instead of at him. Lucas wasn't the kind of man to get spooked easy. He wiped his hands on a rag, turned toward her and asked, "Can I help you with something?" The woman barely blinked. "I used to live here," she said softly. "This place holds many memories." Something in her voice made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up, but he ignored it, nodding politely. "That's so," he said. "Well, if you want, you can sit a spell. Tell me about it." He turned for a chair, and when he looked back, she was gone. At first he figured she'd just walked away when he wasn't paying attention, but later that night, he saw her again. This time she was standing closer, near the truck, her pale hands resting lightly against the hood. Lucas didn't hesitate. He marched toward her, demanding to know what she wanted, but before he could get 2 steps closer, she vanished into thin air. He felt a cold rush of air sweep past him, a whisper of something that smelled like old perfume and damp earth. That was when he knew something wasn't right. The next day, he went to the Millbrook Public Library, hoping to dig up some history on the house. What he found sent a chill straight to his bones. Eleanor Parker died 40 years ago, hit by a car directly in front of his house. He read the old newspaper article 3 times over, trying to wrap his head around it. According to the report, Eleanor had been crossing the street when a driver lost control and struck her. She died instantly. Her family moved away not long after, and the house changed hands over the years, eventually falling into Lucas's possession. He never thought much about its past, until now. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the driveway, waiting. His old hunting rifle leaned against the wall beside him, not that he thought it would do much against whatever she was. At exactly midnight, she appeared again. This time, she was even closer, standing on the porch, looking right at him, her eyes dark and hollow, filled with something achingly human and terribly wrong all at once. Lucas swallowed hard, forced himself to his feet, and walked to the door. His hand trembled on the knob, but he turned it anyway, stepping onto the porch. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. The woman's lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Then, in a whisper carried by the wind, she said, "I never got to say goodbye." The weight of those words settled into his chest like lead. He realized with a kind of terrible certainty that she was stuck. Waiting, searching, holding on to something that had long since left her behind. Lucas took a slow breath. "Eleanor," he said gently, "your family is gone. They moved on. Maybe it's time you did too." Her expression shifted. A flicker of sadness, of understanding, of longing. She smiled, just barely, and then she faded away, dissolving into the night like mist in the morning sun. The next day, Lucas finished painting the truck. It looked damn good, fresh and bright against the autumn leaves. But he couldn't shake the feeling of something missing. That evening, as he stepped onto his porch, he saw them, a small bouquet of flowers, lying there, delicate and perfect, as if they had just been placed. Tied to them was a small note, written in careful, looping handwriting. 2 simple words, "Thank you." Lucas stood there for a long time, the note in one hand, the flowers in the other. He didn't know if ghosts could find peace, didn't know if they ever really left. But that night the house felt different, lighter, quieter, and for the first time in days he slept without dreams. I only heard about Lucas's story a few days later, sitting in the station with a cup of bad coffee and too many thoughts about the Grant house rattling around in my head. When Officer Mitchell mentioned it, something in my stomach twisted. I didn't know what it meant, if it meant anything at all, but I knew one thing for sure. Some ghosts don't want to hurt us, they just don't want to be forgotten. And some doors don't close until we help them shut. I never used to believe in ghosts, not really. Even after what happened at the Grant house, even after hearing Lucas Graham's story about the woman in blue, I convinced myself there had to be an explanation. Stress, fatigue, maybe some things just get stuck in our heads and refuse to leave. That's what I told myself. That's what I wanted to believe. But then I heard about Derek Madsen, and suddenly, the stories weren't just stories anymore. Derek was younger than me, a mechanic over in Bridgeville, about an hour's drive from Millbrook. We weren't close, but we'd crossed paths a few times. Small-town cops and mechanics tend to overlap more than you'd think. He was the kind of guy who never seemed rattled. The kind of guy who could be elbow-deep in engine grease, covered in sweat, and still crack a joke like nothing fazed him. But the last time I saw Derek, he wasn't laughing. He looked tired, on edge, like he was carrying something too heavy for him to handle alone. I heard the rumors first, people saying Derek had seen him, that he wasn't sleeping, that he'd stopped driving at night. I didn't know what to make of it until he showed up at the station, unshaven, eyes bloodshot. He sat down across from me, fingers tapping against his knee, and asked me a question that sent a chill through my spine. "You ever feel like someone's right behind you?" he said. "Like you can feel it even if there's nothing there." I didn't answer right away. I just nodded, and he exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "Yeah," he muttered. "That's what I thought." He told me about Henry Fordham. Henry had been a radio announcer back in the day, one of those old-school voices people listened to over their morning coffee. But around town, he was mostly remembered for his weird habit. He'd tap people on the shoulder when he wanted their attention. No reason, no explanation, just a little 2-fingered flick like an old man's idea of a joke. It was annoying as hell, but harmless. And then he died. Lung cancer. It took him fast. The funeral was quiet, the way things usually are in Bridgeville. People moved on. Except, apparently, Henry didn't. The first sighting happened at a car accident. A couple of teenagers swerved off the road, and when the paramedics arrived, one of them swore they saw an old man standing just beyond the wreckage, watching. But when they looked again, he was gone. Then there was the library fire. 2 firefighters said they saw someone standing at the edge of the flames, hands in his pockets, staring like he was listening to something only he could hear. It wasn't until Derek saw him that people really started to take notice. Derek had been closing up the shop late one night when he saw a figure standing by the garage doors. At first, he thought it was just some guy wandering too close to the property, maybe a drifter looking for a place to sleep. But as he stepped outside and got a better look, his stomach dropped. It was Henry, or what was left of him. His skin looked paper thin, stretched too tight over sharp bones. his suit sagging like it didn't fit him anymore. His eyes were hollow, black pits sunk deep into his skull. And the worst part? His mouth was moving. No sound came out, but his lips were forming words, over and over, like he was stuck in some endless loop of a conversation that had long since ended. Derek froze. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And then he felt it. A tap. Right on his shoulder. His stomach lurched. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to run, but when he turned around, there was no one there. When he looked back, Henry was gone. That was the first time. It wasn't the last. Derek started seeing him everywhere, standing by the roadside, staring into shop windows, lingering near the diner, always just out of reach. And it wasn't just the sightings, it was the feeling, the tap on the shoulder, always when he least expected it, lying in bed, walking through the grocery store. Once, when he was fixing a car, bent under the hood, he felt the tap so clearly he nearly smashed his head on the engine. I could see it in his eyes as he told me all of this. He wasn't making it up. He wasn't confused. He was scared. "I don't know what he wants," Derek said, voice low, "but I don't think he's gonna stop." I wanted to tell him it would pass, that it was all in his head, but I knew better. I knew what it felt like to be haunted. The night Derek finally lost it, he was driving home late, same stretch of road he'd driven 100 times before. It was foggy, the kind of thick mist that made the streetlights look like floating orbs in the darkness. He was tired, the weight of too many sleepless nights pressing down on him. And then he saw him, standing in the middle of the road, right in his headlights. Derek slammed on the brakes, tires screeching against the pavement. His heart pounded so hard he thought his ribs might crack. Henry didn't move, just stood there, staring, his mouth still moving in that silent, endless speech. And then Derek felt it, a tap, right on the back of his neck. He screamed, hit the gas, drove straight through the figure in the road. By the time he got home, he was shaking so bad he could barely get the keys out of the ignition. He sat there, gripping the wheel, trying to tell himself he hadn't just seen what he saw. But then, something in the passenger seat shifted. A weight. Like someone had just sat down beside him. He didn't look, didn't breathe, didn't move until the pressure lifted, until whatever was there was gone. That was 3 nights ago, and the worst part, he could still feel the tap, even now. I didn't know what to say to him. There wasn't anything to say. We sat there in silence for a long time, the hum of the station's fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Finally, Derek let out a slow breath. "You think he'll ever leave me alone?" I wanted to lie, tell him yes, tell him ghosts move on, that they fade, that time fixes everything. But I thought about the Grant house, thought about Eleanor Parker, thought about the way some things stick to places, to people, to moments that refuse to end. Instead, I just shook my head. "I don't know," I said. Derek didn't answer, he just nodded, staring down at his hands. And then, slowly, his fingers twitched. Just once, as if something had tapped them. I watched his face pale. I didn't have to ask. I already knew. Henry Fordham wasn't gone. Not yet. Maybe not ever. If there's one thing I've learned from these stories that aren't just whispers in the dark, but experiences lived, breathed, and survived, it's that some things never truly leave us. We like to believe that time buries the past, that memories fade, that ghosts, whether literal or the ones we carry inside, lose their grip over time. But the truth is, some doors never close on their own. Ethan Carter learned this the hard way when he stepped into the Grant house. There are places in this world where the past lingers, where echoes of what once was refuse to be silenced. The children in that house weren't just spirits. They were trapped, waiting for something, someone, anyone to notice them. And when Ethan did, they made sure he'd never forget. His story is a warning. Not everything that calls to us should be answered. Not every door should be walked through. Then there's Lucas Graham, who found himself speaking to someone who never got to say goodbye. Unlike the Grant house, Eleanor Parker's presence wasn't about malice or torment. It was about unfinished business, a soul left waiting for a moment that never came. Sometimes, ghosts don't haunt places, they haunt themselves. Lucas did what many of us struggle with in life. he helped someone let go, and in doing so, he found peace as well. His story reminds us that closure isn't just for the dead, it's for the living too. And finally, there's Derek Madsen, who discovered that some presences don't want closure, some want to stay. Henry Fordham wasn't just another lingering spirit, he was a shadow that wouldn't fade, a presence that refused to be ignored. Derek's experience proves that not all hauntings come with answers, not all spirits want peace, and not all ghosts disappear when the sun comes up. Some things, some people, leave their marks on us, and sometimes those marks never fade. So, what's the lesson here? First, respect the past. Whether it's a place or memory or a person long gone, some things are better left undisturbed. Curiosity might drive us to look, to seek, to touch, but not everything wants to be found. Second, understand that not all ghosts are spirits. Some hauntings come from within. A lost loved one, a mistake that keeps playing in your mind, a regret too big to let go. Sometimes, the most terrifying ghosts are the ones we carry in our hearts, and if we don't face them, they follow us forever. And lastly, if something feels wrong, listen to that feeling. Call it instinct, call it survival, call it the voice of something watching over you. But when the hairs on your neck rise, when your gut tells you to turn away, when your heart hammers in your chest for no reason you can explain, trust it, because sometimes what you don't see is far worse than what you do. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening, for stepping into these stories with me, for daring to peer into the darkness and ask, what if? Your support means more than words can say, and whether you come here for the chills, the mystery, or the love of a good ghost story, I'm grateful to have you along for the ride. If you've ever had an experience like these, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And remember, some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Stay safe, stay curious, and most importantly, stay aware. Until next time, this is Enigma of the Unknown.